This episode is brought to you by the Boo Chow Decade Awards by the Boo Chow Radio Podcast. If you haven't seen it yet, please click on the link on the description box on your right. Hello everybody, welcome to my Donkey Kong 64 review. Just last week, I've done a review on Donkey Kong Country Trilogy, so check that out. In the meantime, let's give an introduction to this game. DK64 is the first 3D platformer of the series, and the last DK game made by Rare. It's been over a decade since we had a proper good Donkey Kong game. So without further ado, let's begin the review. Everything is going smoothly and peacefully in DK Island until King K. Rool returns for revenge. He has a new ship and a large laser called the Blast-O-Matic used to destroy DK Island, but malfunction after a crash that puts this floating mechanical island face to face to Donkey Kong Island. To buy some time, he captured Diddy, Tiny, Lanky, and Chunky and locks them up where later in the game you have to rescue them. K. Rool also stole Donkey Kong's precious hoard of golden bananas once again. One of the Kong's parrot friend immediately rushed to DK and tell him what's happening. DK went to K. Rool's ship and found a giant lizard caged up named K. Lumsy. He's locked up and he wants to get back at K. Rool. DK agrees to free him and Lumsy opens a new path to find his Kong friends and the boss keys to set him free. The more DK unlocks a lock on his cage, Lumsy opens a new path. As Donkey Kong frees his fellow apes, they set off to recover the bananas and defeat King K. Rool and his army of lemmings and other evil creatures. Before I say anything about the game, DK64 is the first Nintendo 64 game that requires this expansion pack. There are a couple of games in the Nintendo 64 library that support this expansion pack, but games like Donkey Kong 64 and The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask are the only games that requires this accessory. This add-on's purpose is to enhance the graphics on the N64. Luckily, Donkey Kong 64 includes this expansion pack with it. Anyway, back to the game. This is unlike any other Donkey Kong game ever released because Rare used the same engine that was used for Banjo-Kazooie for the Donkey Kong 64. I remember that there were some DK fanboys from the late 90s that complained that this isn't a DK game because it's Banjo-Kazooie with apes and lizards. Similar to how Fallout fanboys today bitches about Fallout 3 is Oblivion with guns. Anyway, both DK64 and Banjo-Kazooie have similar soundtracks, graphics, and controls, but DK64 has more quality and features than Banjo-Kazooie itself. For one, you can play as 5 Kongs one at a time and switch them when you see a Kong barrel. Each of them can throw out orange grenades, have their own weapons to shoot out fruits, use instruments that can destroy all surrounding enemies, play minigames, and enjoyable multiplayer. DK and Chunky are slow but very powerful, Diddy and Tiny are small but agile, and Lanky is fast. If you rate a game on how many collectibles there are, then there's no doubt in my mind that Donkey Kong 64 has to be your favorite game of all time, because DK64 has more collectibles than any other game to date. Sure, Banjo-Kazooie has plenty of stuff to collect, but when you compare it to the collectibles in DK64, it is minuscule. Seriously, there are so many things to collect. Each Kong has to collect individual coins, bananas, and blueprints based on the color, and each of them have certain golden bananas to collect in each and every level. In each and every level, one Kong needs to collect a total of 5 golden bananas in every level, and since there are a total of 5 Kongs, then there are a total number of 25 banana coins per level. Use those coins to buy an individual weapons, musical instruments, and special abilities where you can buy them from Funky, Candy, and Cranky Kong, and those abilities will help you get access to a golden banana and other areas that only one certain Kong can get access to, where a Kong is able to collect colored bananas, a total of 100 bananas per Kong to be exact, where only a certain individual Kong can collect, and use those bananas to feed a giant hippo so he can weigh down the scale from a giant pig to open the door to fight a giant boss. And each boss has to battle a certain individual Kong, and when you beat a boss, you collect a giant boss key, and those keys in turn are used to free K. Lumsy, a giant lizard caged up by King K. Rool from destroying his ship. When you use a boss key to unlock one lock from Lumsy's cage, he can give you access to the next level. Before you get to the next level, you need a total number of golden bananas to get access to the level. So in the next level, you have to repeat the cycle all over again, and you have to keep doing that before you get to the last boss key. But before you can even get access to the last boss key, you also need to collect a total of snapshots from Banana Fairies, Nintendo and a rare coin, and a total of 40 blueprints, and yeah, that's a lot of stuff to collect! Despite having mixed feelings toward the ridiculous amount of stuff to collect, there are a couple of things that I really like to point out to. First off, I really am disappointed that in order to play DK64 on your Nintendo 64, you need an expansion pack. I thought that Nintendo learned a lesson that you don't need add-ons to make graphics. I'm making this complaint because there are only 2 games, DK64 and Majora's Mask, that requires the expansion pack, and other games that had the best graphics for the N64 does not need that pack. Take for example, Conker's Bad Fur fur day. It has the best graphics, one of the few N64 games that has voice acting throughout the game, and has a multiplayer with a lot of features, and it did not need an expansion pack. Even though DK64 includes the expansion pack, it even costs more, which makes me wonder, what the fuck? When I first saw the game, I thought we were finally going to play DK, Diddy, Dixie, and Kiddy Kong together as a team, while to play them all at the same time. But when I realized that I was mistaken that I was tiny and chunky, I was wondering what happened to them. To answer that question, Dixie was the star in the game called Donkey Kong Country 3, and when it was released, it was a huge disappointment in both sales and reception. The developers thought it was best left forgotten, and we would never see Dixie Kong again until Donkey Konga. Piece of shit. Speaking of characters, I am pretty disappointed that the only way you can switch your characters is using that Kong barrel. Switching characters in the Country series is easier and a lot better than switching characters in DK64. It's a big hassle to keep looking and coming back for the Kong barrel just to switch your character, especially when you have a lot of stuff to collect. I don't know, it doesn't really feel that great of an adventure when the main character doesn't have his friends following him around and able to switch them easily. Another big disappointment in DK64 is the lack of animal buddies. Remember in Donkey Kong Country when you were able to ride Rambi and all that stuff? Well, in Donkey Kong 64 you can only play 2 animal buddies in the game, Rambi and On Guard. And what's even more disappointing is that they have a timer when you play as one of those animals. It's a huge lack of fun and adventure if you only have a short period of time to play those animals. Another thing I miss about Donkey Kong Country that DK64 does not have is the mesmerizing feel of the game. What DK64 is missing is an epic soundtrack and more magic in swimming underwater. I don't know, swimming in DK64 is too hard to control and too foggy to see, and in Donkey Kong Country series it was just breathtaking to watch. Another big flaw I have of the game is finding that rare and Nintendo coin. You know where? Yep, in the Donkey Kong and Astronaut game. It's pretty pointless, but you need it when you're trying to find the last boss key in the last level. Also, I never really liked taking snapshots of those banana fairies because they constantly move around and waste my photo films, which are pretty hard to find. Most people who criticize the game always say that some of the mini-games are difficult, but none is difficult than playing those racing games. God, I hate racing, and it's even worse in Donkey Kong 64. The developers thought it wasn't challenging enough to win first place, so they made it harder by collecting certain number of coins before winning first place. The problem with this is that it's way too hard to stay in first place and collecting all those coins where you know that you're gonna lose. One of the worst racing games ever in a video game is when you play Tiny racing against that stupid beetle. Seriously, I failed in that race so many times because the controls were hard and collecting coins was a pain in the ass. This aspect is so bad, I threw my controller and went completely nuts, all pissed off. Racing that fucking beetle is far worse than hearing Slippy and Navi. No, I'm serious. I know that this beetle is more annoying than all those annoying characters combined. And that's saying a lot for someone who couldn't beat that fucking race for over an hour. There are a lot of positives I feel about the game. One thing I really like about this game is that we finally get a chance to play as Donkey Kong. I mean seriously, after 2 sequels without him as a playable character, DK64 brought him back and it feels like a breath of fresh air. One of the strongest features in the game is that they brought everything we love about Banjo-Kazooie and added more in the game. Shooting fruits, blasting off instruments, and so much more to offer. I know that this game has been compared to Banjo-Kazooie a lot, but DK64 was released a year after Banjo and brought everything we loved about Banjo and mixed it with Donkey Kong, and we loved it. The worlds and levels are incredibly huge in this game, and I really like exploring around the levels in the game and find whatever I can collect. This game will keep you occupied if you're planning to collect everything. If you make enough collectibles, you are awarded with a new unlockable on the menu screen like boss fights and multiplayer and so much more. Speaking of which, most people did not like the multiplayer mode, but in my opinion, the multiplayer is a lot of fun. I had a lot of great memories playing with my friends on Survival, Corn Horde, and Battle Arena. Battle Arena is pandemonium fun. The multiplayer is way more fun than the multiplayer in Banjo-Tooie, but not as good as GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, or Conker's Bad Fur Day. I know that I bashed a lot about collecting banana fairies, but the more you collect them, the more stuff you unlock. You'll be able to unlock bonus stages, cheats, multiplayer, and replay boss battles. Speaking of bosses, DK64 has probably one of the best boss fights in the whole franchise. My favorite bosses are Armadillo and Dogadon, and it was even more epic to face both of them for the second time. The most epic boss fight in the entire game is Chunky vs Dogadon, and playing that over and over again is just not enough. It's really disappointing that Donkey Kong 64 is not only the last Donkey Kong game made by Rare, but also the last good Donkey Kong game, period. It seems to me that Nintendo doesn't know how to make the DK franchise good anymore, so they had to put out some DK cast in cameos and playable characters in the Mario Party, Sports, and Smash Brothers games. It's been over a decade since DK64 was released, and I gotta say that I had a lot of fun playing the game throughout all these years. The content, the features, and the things you have to collect will keep you occupied for a long time. Sure, DK64 did not have the wow factor that Donkey Kong Country Trilogy had, but it's no doubt in my mind that it's literally one of the biggest Donkey Kong games ever released. This is one of the best games in the Nintendo 64's library and the biggest 3D platformer game I've known. It's really disappointing that they don't make games like this anymore. If you're one of those gamers who absolutely love Banjo-Kazooie, then this is the game for you. That's why I give this game a 5 fingers out of 5. Stay tuned for my next video when I give off my history with the Donkey Kong franchise. See you there.